good evening, and welcome. It is time once again for CU Immigration here on WRFU LP, Urbana 104.5 FM. I will be your host for this evening. My name is Mr. Garza, and I'm here to let you know that WRFU is an open forum for the Urbana-Champaign community. Yep. Views expressed are those of the speakers and are not intended to represent WRFU, UCIMC, Urbana Socialist Forum, or on the TV version of the show, UPTV. These views are our own, and by our, in this instance, if not in any other, I mean myself and my two charming guests who are seated before me, who look like they're all doing homework or something. What are you doing there? Writing notes?
Writing notes,
anyway, yeah.
Doodling.
Would you like to introduce yourselves to the people?
Yes. Hi, everyone. My name is Grant Haugen.
Hi, Grant.
Good evening. My name is Gurdeep. Kaur.
Wow, that was so soft. I have to turn you way up. Let's try that again.
Good evening. My name is Gurdeep. Kaur.
I'm not getting anything. Keep talking.
Testing. Hi. I am a second-year Master of Urban Planning student at U of I.
Nothing. Nada.
We can share this one.
You may have to. I had that working before. Well, it's working. There's sound coming up. Hello? Yeah. We just hold it right up next to your mouth.
Hi.
Yes, there you go. Oh, sorry. I'm yelling in the microphone.
Sorry about that.
That's okay. Apparently, it's very soft microphone. I've got like cranked totally up here. Anyway, go ahead.
My name is Gurdeep Kaur, and I'm a second-year Master of Urban Planning student at U of I.
All right, now we've got that off to a good start. Now we're here. So, what brings you here to visit us today? What is your motivation for coming all the way down here to Urbana and visiting a show called CU Immigration?
So both of us are in a local policy and immigration course at UIUC right now.
Aha.
And as part of our first project, we're both dealing with totally different issues dealing with immigration here. And we're both dealing with Champaign County, but I know the class is dealing like large scale. One person's doing Italy. I'm doing immigration here on campus with international students.
Yeah.
So yeah, that's why we came down to talk to you about our projects.
Cool. I'm so happy that you did that because it's really hard to find, it's not hard to find people who are interested in being guests. It's hard to find people who can show up at the time that we're doing the show and aren't afraid to talk on the radio or TV or whatever. You know, all those things, getting all those things together at the same time seems to be difficult for some reason. Anyway, what are you studying?
So my project is actually trying to understand viewpoints of people who oppose immigration.
Oh.
Yeah, trying to understand the narrative there because it's something I don't know much about.
About opposing it or?
Yeah.
Yeah, yeah.
Just so a little bit about myself. I grew up in a, so I am a first generation American.
Uh-huh.
My parents immigrated here from India. I grew up in a largely Latino neighborhood in Los Angeles. Never really, I was very familiar with immigration issues.
Yeah.
And basically a lot of pro-immigrant voices. And as I'm trying to become an active citizen in society, I realize, well, if we're just preaching to the choir, we're not going to get anywhere.
Yeah.
So I would like to understand why people oppose immigration and what the logic and rationale there is.
Mm-hmm. Is that disheartening to do that sometimes?
It's actually...
Well, as an immigrant in particular, I mean, it would be one thing to just like, as an intellectual study, like, oh, well, I wonder why these people say this. And, you know, that's one thing. But some of the things they're going to say are about you, whether they mean it specifically about you or not. You can't help but kind of go, well, wait, you're talking about me here.
Yeah. I've had a blast doing my project simply because I get to go to social events and just basically hang out with people and talk to them.
Uh-huh.
But I noticed that it takes me about an hour to psych myself out into going every time. I should be looking forward to it, but this has been like personally challenging.
Yeah, I would think it would be.
Yeah, I also write a blog. We all write a blog for our class, and the word that our classmate used to describe my entry last week was heartbreaking.
Oh, no.
Yeah.
Wow. So what are you doing specifically, Grant?
So I'm looking at how international students activate campus space. So I'm studying the quad and the arc.
Uh-huh.
So this is done began with observations.
Yeah.
And then I made a map that I distributed to different students and had them kind of plot out what they use if they're in the arc or the quad, where they feel uncomfortable, the activities that they do, the path if they're walking through it, and then study those a little bit. And then I did a few different interviews to see kind of what the campus environment is really like for international students. But it's really like their use of space that's so interesting to me, because there's so many different cultures and groups of people at UIUC. And the amount of international students keeps growing, that this campus has one of the largest amounts in the country of international students.
Yeah.
And it's a continual trend happening. And especially in my program, I'm in the landscape architecture program. So even though this is an urban planning course, I'm just taking it for fun, learn more about it. But my program is predominantly Chinese.
Yeah.
So I'm a minority in it. So it's given me a whole new perspective on international students. So walking around, like on part of the quad near where our building is, I always see Indian guys that are out there playing cricket or working out at the Arc. It seems like there's always Chinese students playing racquetball. So I just wanted to kind of, that's what I was noticing, but I want to kind of confirm my observations and see like if what I'm seeing is really happening, if they use it differently.
That's interesting. Yeah, every year, you may have known this event. They have a thing called Quad Day right before campus starts, and CU Immigration always has their little table out there, and I'm always sitting out there baking in the sun. And it's been interesting, even in the last just 2 or 3 years, to see the percentages of people that are out there has really changed a lot. It used to be like lots and lots of what looked like suburban Chicago white kids, and then a fair amount of other ethnicities mingled in. But this last year, it was like, are there any Chicago suburban white kids even coming to school this year? I don't know, because if there are, they're not out here today. It was just really different, and it was interesting. And the way they interacted with me, deciding whether to come over and talk to me or to look at the stuff or not, was very different too. There's a real sort of privileged attitude. I call them suburban Chicago white kids, because there's a certain attitude that they sort of share of like, hey, I belong here. I own this space. This is mine. And they I don't know if that's just something they have throughout life that they just carry with them when they come here, or if it's something they feel particularly about this space because, like, well, my parents went here, so it's my school. I don't know. I mean, I've never spoken to them, but they had this real sense of like ownership of the sidewalks and the things, everything. They just kind of, they took up space in this way that this last year at summer, it was very different. People were like, more self-contained, like in little groups. I mean, they still seemed relaxed and comfortable. It wasn't that they didn't seem comfortable. They just didn't seem to have this sense of like swaggering ownership that they used to. So I don't know. I'm just throwing that out there.
Grant and I just had this conversation last week.
Really?
Yeah. So he was
about Quad Day or about just in general?
The presence of people on the sidewalk, because we were like talking, the two of us, and I was saying like my observations, and Pradeep had suggested that I look at people like on the sidewalk, and if certain people move out of the way and some people don't, and it was hard for me to pick up on. That's why I was laughing that you had said that.
Yeah,
because apparently it's a thing.
And it's so he was having a hard time because when he would interview somebody saying, "Do you feel discriminated against?" the answer was no, I'm fine. So I said, like, sometimes you don't even notice when it's happening.
Right.
And so what I've noticed, so I'm going to bring up a pop culture reference here.
Sure.
but there's this movie called Crash. It's set in LA.
Yeah.
The opening monologue is, in LA, we're just so desperate to, like, for human interaction, we just, like, crash our cars into each other. And one thing that, so there's a complete difference between big cities like New York, where you're constantly being jostled around, and you're touching people, and that's fine. But where I grew up in LA, where, you know, we're sprawled out, you don't touch people, you have your own space, we're very adamant about it. And if you do even, like, just brush against someone, you immediately apologize, or you are going to react in violence, and it's going to lead somewhere. And here, there is that bumping, and I get bumped so much more for what a spread out community it is. And I realize, like, I'm expected to constantly, like, jump onto the parkway or jump onto the road even to walk. And it's just interesting.
Well, there is a gender dynamic at play too, because I notice this a lot. Of course, see, I'm in a privileged position when I'm sitting at a table because I can watch everybody. It's hard to watch people when you're walking. You know, when you're one of the crowd, it's hard. You know, you're navigating. You're spending a part of your brain doing that sort of thing. I'm on the radio and I'm making hand gestures. Yeah, this is really helpful, isn't it? You know what I mean. Anyway, but when you're sitting there just watching people, and it's not like weird stalkerish, like I'm a person sitting on a park bench watching people, but I'm actually supposed to be looking at you because I'm trying to get you to come over and talk to me. You know, that is a position where you really can see people and observe them in a different way. So I do get to notice these things maybe in a more fine-tuned way than you would just sitting around watching, you know, people walk by or just walking around with them. But yeah, that's something. I wonder how much of that is a gender thing and how much of that is a Western
size,
versus
or just
not.
a size thing as well.
Yeah, size thing as well.
Or even just like who's alpha, who's not alpha, because every person, every society has someone who's just gonna like own the sidewalk and not move at all.
Yeah, I noticed as a smaller male that I sidestep, but I do that automatically anyway. I learned to do that very young as just, I don't think it was a defensive thing. I think it was a politeness thing. I was like, oh, well, one of us has to move. I will be the one to move out of the way. I will get out of your way, you know. I don't know where I picked it up. I just did. And so I've always kind of automatically stepped aside or been very aware of where people were going so that I could not be in their way when they get there. And I don't know, but that's a story with no point, I guess. Anyway, it's an interesting thing to observe, though, and I think it would be fascinating to try to see if different groups own space in different ways, you know.
Yeah, well, in terms of walking, it was hard to tell, but when I had the map and had people draw out their path or like circle where they spend time, and then I overlay them all on top of each other, it was really interesting to see like the common points. And with some international students from, say, China, they all gravitated towards doing certain activities on the quad that maybe students from Iran or India weren't, or like what they do in the ARC is a little bit different.
Yeah, that is interesting. Have you come to any conclusions yet, or you're just starting?
No, I have. So that's why I brought my notebook with. I knew I'd forget this.
Okay.
So for instance, out of all the forms that I had, which were about 28, there's only one Indian person that said that they feel a little bit uncomfortable, and it was glances in the quad and the arc. And I noticed that in the quad, Indians are the most likely to socialize, and in the arc, they're the most likely to use cardio machines in the sauna. And then with Chinese students, in the quad, they suggested more shaded areas, and they're most likely to read and rest. And what's interesting with that is on the form, I had maybe like 5 activities I could circle. And there were 5 people that actually wrote in resting. So I didn't even think that would be something that someone would do out there. Yeah. And in terms of the arc, they're the most likely to use the walking track. I had 77% of the Chinese participants indicate that, and use the indoor pool over the outdoor pool. And then with Iranians, they wrote in volleyball, which I didn't think about at the arc. and they're the only group that indicated that they use workout classes.
Oh.
So what was interesting with mine is I distributed these forms to all international students that I could find. But with some, it was just a singular, like one person from Taiwan or one from Bangladesh. So it's kind of hard to see like if what they said was an actual trend or just that one
Right.
person.
Right.
So I had the most responses from India, China, and Iran. So I'm more at the end of the day with this project, kind of like comparing those three.
Oh,
So I
okay.
can like really see patterns.
It's very interesting. I would never think to do that, but I guess that's why you're doing what you do, and
Yeah.
I'm not.
And that's why I'm here today.
Yeah, but it is interesting to know because people do, and that's the thing, I guess, to sort of broaden the point a bit. Has always fascinated me about immigration is people come here with certain kind of sort of two things going. They come here with expectations for what they think they're going to find here, and they come here with unspoken, unconscious assumptions with what they bring with them. So, I mean, they're bringing both things with them, but one is kind of looking ahead and one is sort of coming from behind, you know. And you bring both of those things here, and they each affect you in different ways, because one is conscious. I'm looking for this, you know. That's why I'm here, is because I want to find this thing. And the other is all unspoken, just this is just how I grew up, this is how people are, this is up, this is down, you know. These are things that I've always known and assumed and believed to be true, you know. And what happens when that collides with the reality of here has always fascinated me, because once you get here, it's like, oh, whoa, this is not what I was expecting in some ways. And you could probably speak to that, I'll bet.
Yeah, well, I was just going to speak in the context of,
Yeah.
so we spoke about how it used to be largely white suburban Chicago kids.
Right.
Well, international students are those who can afford to pay not only the tuition here, but also the international fees here.
Right.
So we are ethnically diversifying our population, our student population, but are we socioeconomically diversifying?
Not really. Well, sort of, but not really. Yeah.
Right. And so the people we're attracting tend to be from privileged backgrounds, and we're just, you know, and then they come from a place where they've constantly been at an advantage in their home countries. And when those hierarchies clash, what happens then?
Mm-hmm.
That's
Yeah,
interesting.
because you may be a big wheel where you come from, but nobody knows that, and you can name drop all you want, and they're like, I don't know what you're talking about. So, yeah, that changes a lot of things when you get out of your sort of sphere of, you know, comfort zone into another place. You just don't know what you're going to find there, and that's the fascinating thing about moving from place to place, or traveling, I guess. But that's interesting. But I thought you were going to talk about how people are resistant to this kind of thing. I mean, that's what you're studying, right? That's what you're
Yeah.
researching?
So my focus was more on like the narrative and like what is the language that is used
Oh, okay.
to like justify or to rationalize like these arguments against immigration. And what I'm finding are just how people talk about these issues, especially, so my presence in and of itself kind of creates this barrier and people are hesitant to discuss things.
Mm-hmm.
But what I've begun to notice is that people talk around the subject.
Oh, yeah. Yeah.
So I will try to bring up immigration, and they will not touch immigration with me because they recognize that I'm, you know, first generation American. But what they will talk about is race in general in America. Or they will use other races to exemplify things, but they won't talk directly at the subject. So it's just,
Interesting.
yeah.
Because you're you.
Yes.
You think in that? Do you announce yourself to them before you start talking? I mean, do you say, "I am an immigrant, I'm studying this," or do you just start talking?
No, I just start talking. So I've been trying to just go attend meetings for different political groups on campus, and just kind of getting to know them. And usually I'm the only person of color at those meetings.
Mm-hmm.
But yeah, I don't announce even my political background or anything. I'm there to like listen and learn.
Well, how do they know you're an immigrant then?
Because I'm brown.
Oh, so you're talking about a space where the assumption is that because you look different from the people in the space, you are different beyond just I was raised next door to you all your life, but you just never met me. to, oh, you must be from somewhere else because you look different? I mean, are they
Yes.
going that far with it?
Yes, the "where are you from" question.
Okay. Yeah.
Interesting story.
Yeah.
So I was biking home one day, and I didn't have lights on my bike. That was my fault, and it was very late, and I was pulled over for not having lights on my bike.
Oh,
I was pulled over by 3 cops in 2 cop cars,
wow.
wearing a neon pink jacket. For those of you who can't see me, I don't think I have an intimidating persona.
I'm kind of backing up here.
You look
I don't
pretty
know.
tough. I don't
Yeah.
know.
I am
And I'm
tough.
sitting next to you.
But like 5'4", 110 pounds ish.
Uh-huh.
But I didn't have my ID. I had my passport on me, my U.S. passport.
Oh, okay.
And the police officers were being very nice. But one of the questions was, "Oh, where are you from?" And I thought, okay, maybe they're just asking, just to be friendly. But in my mind, I'm like, well, you have my U.S. passport with my place of birth listed on it. Is that really a viable question?
Oh, really? Huh.
Was this in
Interesting.
Urbana that you were pulled over?
Champagne.
Oh.
Oh, yeah. Well, yeah, there's some differences between Urbana and Champaign. That's really interesting. So you go into these spaces and they automatically wonder about you, like why are you here and where are you from, kind of
Yeah.
thing.
And I always just say LA because that's all I know. And that's not a sufficient answer.
So what's the follow-up question? So we're sitting
Well-
here at a social event, and I say, so where are you from?
I'm like, oh, just the LA area. Oh, and then it'll always be, it's usually an eye roll followed by, well, where's your family from?
Like, where are you really from?
Yeah.
Like, you know what I mean when I ask that question. Don't play around. And I'm
What
like,
are you is
Yeah.
the slightly less polite way of saying the same thing.
and
What are
then
you?
I'm caught between this dichotomy where it's like, I can't represent the Indian community. There is a large Indian community here. I can't speak for them. I don't understand anything that they're going through at the moment. My parents did not come here through student visas. They're working class. So it's a different world.
How old, do you mind asking how old you were when you came here?
I was born and raised here.
Oh, you were born here. I thought you said
Right.
first generation.
So my parents would be the immigrant generation. Then I guess I'm the first generation, or would they be the first generation?
Well, see, I call myself second generation because my parents came here and then I was born here.
Okay.
So that's how I think of it. So that's what was confusing me. I
Sorry.
thought first generation,
Second
you would
generation.
be like, you're the one who came here, and then that's okay. I don't know. I'll have to ask somebody if that's right because that's how I've always described it, and
Okay.
I've never known. So anyway, so you're born here. Okay, so you are from L.A.
Yes.
You're not from anywhere else.
No.
That is so weird. I mean, you should just say I'm from L.A. I was born there.
Yeah.
That's where I'm from.
Yeah.
Then they have to ask where your family is from, and you say, well, L.A. That's where they
Yeah.
live.
Yeah, it's great when my sister gets the question because then they'll be like, okay, well, where are you from? And, she'll say LA. She lives in Seattle currently. And they'll be like, well, they want to go around the issue. Or they'll be like, oh, where's your family from? She'll say they're in California. Well, where are you born? She was born in Germany.
Uh-huh.
Complete wrench in the works.
Oh, there you go.
So just all these migratory patterns. And, if we think about it, migration's such a natural thing. It's
Yeah.
borders that are the unnatural.
Yeah,
Mm-hmm.
It's borders that are the new phenomenon.
right. Yeah, that's why, well, I don't have that, but that's why the butterfly is the sort of standard immigrant, symbol because they just go wherever, and they travel all over the place and that's what they do and nobody stops them because they're butterflies. But apparently if you're a person, it's a little different story,
Yeah. Or if you're a corporation, you can
Well,
go
you can
wherever
go
you
anywhere.
want.
Yeah, right. There's no problem. It's just if you're a person. It's the only time it's a problem, apparently.
Yeah.
Apparently. So that's interesting. So you're working with international students and you're working on immigration. Do you ever compare notes as to the difference between the ways that these outsiders, if we can call them that, are navigating their situation here, are dealing with life? Because I remember, this was a long time ago, but there was some student stuff going on. There was a lot of social justice movement things. I was really involved on things on campus, and there was this was pre Black Lives Matter, but it was about over incarceration of young black men and things like that. And so we were trying to identify people who could be natural sort of support or who would be interested in this. And so one of the people in our group approached some international students from Africa, and they were like, "Not my problem. I have nothing to do with it. It means nothing to me. I don't even understand your issue. I don't see why this is a problem. Go away," kind of was their reaction. And this person was really surprised. I was more like, well, that kind of makes sense. I mean, it didn't really surprise me that much, but it was an interesting moment that really put home that while there are people who like to just categorize by skin tone or hair type or eye shape or whatever, within those groups there are huge differences of stuff. And I mean, as you're finding out, the different groups that are navigating these spaces, and they may, to the people she's hanging out with, they may all look like, oh, they're just foreigners, or they're all Asians, or whatever. But you're going, well, no, these are people from Taiwan, these people are from China, these are from Japan. They have Korea. They have very different experiences and very different personal things going on. And I've completely lost track of where I was going with that statement. No. Was I responding to something or getting ready to ask a question?
I think you're just making an interesting observation.
I'm just blabbing, and I'll let you guys talk. So you say something interesting now.
Well, I don't know if I have anything interesting to say, but a reaction to what you said. I guess in my program, what's been fascinating is that there are so many Chinese students. In my current studio of 19 students, there's one other Caucasian person and me. So I think before I wasn't, like, I'm from northern Minnesota, so it's like 99% white. So I was never like around Chinese people at all, or Asians. Mm-hmm. So I think it's been really fascinating to, like, instead of just being like, oh, those are Chinese people, it's like everyone's so different. I think you really realize that, like, the more that you hang out with international students or just people from other countries, that there's so many different nuances between them. It reminded me of an interesting story of, like, one of the Chinese students that I interviewed in as a part of this project. So we were talking about the space at the Arc, and I was saying how I always notice that whenever I go by the racket courts, it's always Chinese students. Like, that's it. I never see anybody else in there. Uh-huh. And I was like, are there any other sports that are popular? And he was like, yeah, basketball is, because there was that one really tall Chinese dude, I can't even think of his name. He's like...
Yao Ming.
Yeah, he's like 9 feet tall or something, just crazy. So my friend was saying that ever since he became popular, basketball has become like a much more popular sport amongst Chinese youth. And then I was asking them about playing around here, and he said that Chinese students will only play in the Arc. They don't go outside to the outdoor spaces because those are exclusively reserved for black basketball players. And like they just kind of like had that understanding, and I thought that's like fascinating to me that they I don't know, it was like an unwritten rule, like they don't go out there. And I didn't really know if it was a safety thing, and like I didn't really want to ask. I was kind of like embarrassed what the answer might be.
Yeah.